welcome. The show is Keeping Connected with Trevor Crow After Hours, and tonight we're in partnership with W2W Magazine. We're here at Fairfield Theater Company, and we're going to discuss divorce Fairfield County style. That's right. We're going to be discussing about all the aspects that women have to deal with here in Fairfield County. And sitting next to me is a panel of wonderful experts. Thank you so much for being with us, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to start with Marilyn Chinnitz right here on my right. She is a partner at Blank Roan and a celebrity divorce attorney. Sitting next to her is Vicki Volper, collaborative attorney and mediator in Westport. And next to Vicki is Paula Levy, mediator and licensed marriage and family therapist who works with Vicki at Divorce Mediation Team of Connecticut. So this begs the question, and a lot of people have asked me, and this is again in therapy, what's the difference between a mediator and a lawyer, and why would a couple go to a mediator instead of a lawyer? Would you like to start, Marilyn?
Well, a mediator is often a lawyer. So we're coming out of the same scenario. Our approach to a case is very different. Mm-hmm. I'll speak for my part, which is I'm a litigator. Mm. So if you are coming through my door, it is basically a contested action, and that means that you are somewhat armoring up to go forward in the divorce process. Mm. However, notwithstanding the fact that you may litigate, 99% of the cases will settle. It's just that they may not settle in your office, they may settle on the steps of the courthouse.
So, Vicki, you are a mediator. Is a couple, I'm assuming a couple that walks in your door can at least trust one another and believe that they can come to an agreement without having to go to this fight, sort of arming up, as Marilyn's saying. Is that true?
Well, yes and no. A couple may not be trusting each other with respect to emotional issues, but they do have some basic level of trust with respect to finances. They know that the other person is not having their money hidden in a Swiss bank account. If they do, I send them to Maryland.
And so Paula, what would you start looking for in your clients? Are there red flags? Are there aspects of a couple that you say, this really is not for you, you really do need to go talk to Marilyn?
Right, so we already spoke a little bit about the trust issue, because in mediation you are trusting that they're going to provide the information, especially financial information. And if either of them doesn't trust their spouse in that manner, probably mediation would not be for them. But in addition to that, we won't work with people that have, say, substance abuse issues or mental health issues, because part of mediation, and one of the benefits of it, is that you advocate for yourself. And if you're unable to do that, then probably mediation is not the best place for you, and you need the assistance of individual attorneys.
Now, Marilyn, I always think of a couple that maybe has a great deal of assets will first go to somebody like you. Maybe they wouldn't be able to mediate. Is that true?
I think for the most part it is, because when you have substantial assets, it requires forensic evaluations, it requires appraisals. You can't take the word of your spouse that this is the value, so you're going to have to vet out and do your own discovery, and that takes a team of experts. So these are assets that require very specific knowledge, and you cannot just rely on someone saying, this is the value and let's divide it. You need to understand what the value is, therefore you need someone to give you that information. There's a lot of tax consequences when you divide up assets. You need to understand what the tax ramifications are. If it is more a situation where it's a W-2 employee, it might be easier and clearly beneficial to go through mediation. You don't have to go through the expense of a litigation.
That would be a big difference. So here in Fairfield County, we hear these horrible stories of crazy divorces that go into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that in fact the system is set up to be very adversarial. Have you come across that? I mean, you must.
It is very expensive, and certainly any good lawyer is going to advise their clients to settle out of court, do your due diligence, but you don't have to go to a judge to get a determination. And after all, who wants someone who has no interest in you to make a decision for you and your family? So you can still do all of the due diligence, but you don't have to be adversarial. Accountants generally from both sides like to work together to vet out what the numbers are, and you can have a roundtable discussion to figure out all the different issues. But certainly, even as a litigator, I much prefer settling a case.
Trevor, I would agree with Marilyn, but I would qualify what she said. Because someone has a lot of money doesn't mean that their finances are not transparent. Often we have worked with people who are hedge fund managers, but their spouses have been involved in the day-to-day, know what the finances look like, and feel comfortable that they will not need to have forensic work done.
So that leads me to my next question. Are you finding women lately, Fairfield County, maybe are better prepared, maybe more up on the information? Maybe you're walking into this tough transitional phase in their lives with more ammunition, so to speak. They understand what they're having to do.
Often, very often there is one spouse who's more financially savvy than the other, but it's not always the man who's the one who's more financially savvy. Education is definitely part of the mediation process. We bring the less educated, financially educated spouse along so that they can manage their finances going forward. That's an important piece.
It's a very important piece. So, Paula, what do you feel that women out there really need to think about and prepare for, sort of emotionally and mentally going into this process?
Well, one of the things that we see a lot is that in every case is that each person in the couple is in a different place when they're getting ready to divorce. So maybe one of them has anticipated this or planned for it, or at least emotionally gotten ready for that, whereas the other person, maybe it might be a shock, or emotionally they're just not ready to get divorced. So, I mean, that's one way we have to work with them to go at the pace that works for both of them. One wants to sort of get it done and put it behind them. The other person wants to spend more time understanding it and really, understanding it and processing it and getting through the emotional piece of it.
So one of the things I'm curious about, Marilyn, is there was an article, front page of the New York Times yesterday, about women breadwinners, women on Wall Street with stay-at-home husbands. How are you seeing that impacting the divorce process these days?
Well, there's clearly a role reversal in those situations, because in those situations the women are out working and they leave the home at 5:30 and they come home at 9 o'clock, and the men are at home taking care of the children. And the dynamics are very interesting, because very often, even though you have a powerhouse woman who's on Wall Street or in the medical field or an attorney, at the end of the day, she's also still involved in raising the children. So she's multitasking to the nth degree.
Exhausted.
Exhausted.
I'm sure.
And what I find in my practice is when you meet these women and you're representing them, they have a real hard time giving support payments to a man.
I can understand that.
And especially where there is a nanny who's taking care of the children and so, but there is a role reversal. And there are issues like any other issue. It's gender neutral, having to pay support, dividing up the assets. The court may look differently at these men and say, well, you could go back to work. You don't have to stay at home. The kids are out now. So our judges are getting used to, or beginning to get used to, the idea that there are a lot of men who are home. And that was driven when the economy went down and a lot of men lost their jobs.
Right.
And they just never resumed the work, going back into the same areas that they were in. So it's a role reversal for sure.
Bold new times, really changing it up. And I'm sure it matters in mediation too. Do you feel that you have some of these sort of women who are making the majority of the money and they're having to pay out now, and it's okay in mediation?
Absolutely.
Do women hide assets the way the men have in the past? Sorry, men, I'm apologizing. But we've seen it happen, or the women doing that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're seeing as a cause of divorce very often, when the economy went down in the late 2008, 2009, there were very high-powered men who lost their jobs. And some of them had wives who had the kind of jobs they didn't lose, teachers, nurses. And the fact that the husband was no longer providing in the way that was contracted when they got married is very often a cause for the divorce.
Resentment.
Yes.
Resentment, that's
Not
big.
following through.
Right, or they feel they're not working hard enough to get a job, or they should be working 2 jobs or something like that, but it's We see a number of
Very
people
tough on the
getting
guys
divorced.
too, though. That's
Very tough
emotionally
on them.
draining and tough on their identity.
Right.
Well, we've just had a very interesting discussion. If you're thinking, are you going through this process, which is very tough, and you have the question whether you need a mediator or you need an attorney, you've just heard some great answers. We have this wonderful panel with us, Marilyn Chinitz, Vicki Volper, and Paula Levy, and we're here to help. We've got lots of information, so stay tuned. This is Keeping Connected After Hours with Trevor Crow. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also like us on Facebook. We'd love to hear your questions and your opinions, and send them in. We'll talk about them right up here on stage. So stay tuned.